your deliverables for a project is to create some computer-based training. So while you're creating it, you have to make sure that it's actually going to work right. You have to make sure that it's done well. So how do you do that? How do you test computer-based training? What are the phases? What is the process for doing this? So I like to do a number of things. So first of all, as far as content goes, your content should already have been checked during your task analysis and then again during storyboarding. So you should have a good sign off from your SME that your content is ready to go. I'm not looking to make sure my content is good during development, like during the development of my computer-based training or my software. I should already know that's good. So as far as content goes, you should already have that checked off. So what do we care about during this development phase of CBT? What I care about is if all my software and everything is going to work. So how do I do this? And this is done in a number of phases, and I like to think of it as like an alpha phase with a few phases within that, and then a beta phase with a few phases within that. So during my alpha testing is kind of done, sometimes the beginning of it's done before I even start. And that's and I don't want to say before I start, before I do a lot of work, I'm in alpha testing already. And this happens throughout development, these tests. All right, so alpha testing is where I'm going to look for big, major problems. Okay, so like, for example, we've agreed upon a software to use to create the project and everything. I have my statement of work. We've been designing, only to find out that the client didn't really give me the right information about their back-end system. Like sometimes they tell me they have an LMS. Now I know to go and check that before I start anything, but they don't always know your terminology, and they may say they have an LMS, or what might happen is they may say, yes, we're getting an LMS. It'll be ready by the time you're ready for development or implementation, only to find out, hey, that's going to be pushed back 6 months, but we still need this training. So when I'm ready for development, I make sure whatever this is going to be implemented on works, because the client isn't always clear about what that's going to be, because it can change. We talk about scope creep, but this might not even be scope creep. This might be like we're still rolling this out. It's still happening, but here's what's happening now. So first I make sure whatever I'm developing is going to work even on the system they're telling me. Then I start to stress the system. And what does that mean? If I'm installing on a server, if I'm installing on an LMS, whatever I am installing in, I make sure that works. Then I develop like a few screens of whatever I'm developing, like a mock-up, and I try to stress it. Are my videos going to work? So I might put like a dummy video on and check, is this working via mobile if that's how they want it? Or is it working on the computer? What are the problems I'm encountering right now? Before I start this, what are we running into? You have to test it right away like that to make sure it's all going to work. Because a lot of times that's the first time you can even do the testing, because it's all being done on their system. The client's not necessarily yours. So yeah, I know that whatever I'm developing in works on mobile, but is it going to work on mobile when it's on their server? So this is where I start to stress the system and really test it. If they can give me a sandbox version, which is like a dummy version to kind of do tests, that's fine. If not, we'll do it live if we have to, live and hidden links and everything. But I check to make sure all that stuff, is my narration working? Does it stream well? Are the however we're recording, are they okay? Is that going to work? Are my images showing up clearly? So I do that kind of testing. That's my alpha testing. And this happens throughout development, different phases, different points. I make sure it's still working. I'll stress the system by like clicking a whole, once I start to get my training developed, like I have a good portion of it developed, I'll push the next button or continuous button like 100 times to see if I can break it. Can I break my piece of software? And I look for all of those little things. I might even involve some users in this and start to see if they can break the system or make sure everything's functioning correctly. But really, once we start getting the users involved and it's a little more in-depth, I'm starting to get into that beta mode, beta testing. So beta testing is when I pretty much know everything's there. It's working. We're like 85+% done. We're looking for little glitches. Like when I think of beta testing, I start to think of like, one of the links out of 100 links is not working because I entered something wrong. You know, little tiny errors. That's what beta testing is for. The alphas, the big, the betas, that we're starting to get these minor, we're doing minor touches up. We're trying to make sure everything's running and going to be a smooth implementation, but we've got most of it nailed down already. This is when I start to involve the users. Usually the way I do that is I'll start with one or two, you know, a few one-to-one users. That's where I can really go through. I can observe them while they're going through, and I can fix all like the main, like if a few links aren't working and stuff, I can get all that stuff taken care of. Then I really, depending on how large the training is and what your audience is, I like to get a small or even a medium size, depending on what you define as those sizes, groups in. You know, that could be 3 to 5 users. It could be 30 users. Get them in a room and get them testing it and using it while you're there, you know, in some kind of lab or setting where they can use it. And I can walk around and hopefully we're not even really finding anything, but I guarantee you always find a few things that you just didn't pay attention to. You know, they always say, like, you know, when you're writing something, like, you know, you hear of a student writing their dissertation and they forgot their name on it. You've seen it so much, especially if it's just one person working on this. You see it so often that you miss little things. It's one of the reasons, like a lot of gaming companies right now, they let their users involved in the beta testing. They put their users in and let the users stress and test the system and see what's going on during this big beta test, and then they can go in and fix all the little things, you know, that they realize, like, oh, this moved a little incorrectly, let's fix that. You know, little things like that they can go in and do. It's a great way to solve problems. And once I'm pretty much past that phase, I know this is ready to roll out. I know we're ready for implementation, you know, when I'm done with getting it all squared away. It's done. So that's how I test it. I really go through this alpha to beta phase, starting with big, and then start to get to minor little errors. And that's how I test my software to make sure it's going to run and be ready for implementation. But you have to just make sure it's really going to work well. And you do that first. It's the first thing you do, so that you don't develop something, have it all developed and be like, hey, you know, I know we were supposed to put this on the LMS, but now you guys changed it to your server and I developed it and it's not going to run right. The video is not going to be quick enough, or whatever it is, isn't going to work right. So you test all that stuff right before you start development in the alpha testing. All right. Thank you.